Okay guys, according to most of you, you wanted me to do a video tutorial. You said it would be better if you could stop and start and watch as I do the stuff. So here goes. I'm going to do all the stuff we did in class. Then I'm going to do week 2 and then I'll be doing week 3. So this first video is going to be everything we did in week 1 and then I will progress forward. So like we did in class, I require you to go onto Classroom and download those sprites. Remember they were called Cuphead underscore or -01 sprites, and you're going to just drag them into your Unity like we did in class. So you just have all these idle animations for Cuphead, the run and the jump. This is going to be introduced in the second video, but for this video we're going to walk through all the logic again and how to create your controller. But in order to do that, I'm just going to go File, Save, and I'm going to save the scene as week 1, as you can see in the top left in my hierarchy. And then we're just going to drag one of these sprites just to use as a reference. I'm just going to drag it into the hierarchy so that it's at 000 in the translate. There's my little character. I'm just going to rename that to player. I'm also just going to rename the camera. As you can see, I've already named it before the video. We're just going to call it player camera. Make sure everything is as it is. I'm going to delete this folder here because we don't need it just yet. So in your scene you should have a player and your player and your camera. You can delete the lights if you want to for the time being, and then we're just going to get started. So now that we have this, we just need to grab that scene image we used in class. Let me just see if I can find it. Probably just going to grab another one just to change it up a little bit. So we're going to play with this little background here. Also probably going to drag another one just to continue the little runway, a little pathway here. There we go. Just adding some background images here so I can just mess around with. And now remember, like we did in class, I'm just going to create a collider. Now I want to start with good habits, not bad habits. I could add a collider to each one of these objects, these background objects, like we did in class with the one, but I'm going to create one collider for both of them. So these are habits you should be picking up. If the floor is completely level, do not go and add colliders to every object. You want to add one collider for wherever it's flat, then change to a new collider if the angle changes. So I'm going to go to Game Object, Create Empty. Just going to rename this to Floor Collider, just so I know what that is. I'm also just going to reset the position. And now on this empty game object, I'm going to add component, and I'm going to add a box collider. And remember, we're now going to do something new this term. We're going to be doing 3D colliders and not 2D colliders. So make sure you add a box collider, just a normal one. Hit the edit button and let's just make sure this collider covers the entire floor, and then we'll reposition the height so that it looks like he's running on this floor. So I'm going to drop it just a little bit down so you can see it looks like he'll run in this looks like a vegetable field, a vegetable patch. There's my collider. That is the collider, and it should now hold my character. And before we can continue, as you probably have guessed, we need to add a capsule collider to our character so that he doesn't fall through the floor. Just going to make sure that the feet are just in line with the bottom of the capsule collider, maybe a little higher. It's better if the feet kind of go a little bit through the floor than if it looks like he's floating. And for now I think that collider is good. And we also need to just make sure something, yeah, we just need to add a rigid body. So I'm just going to add a rigid body component. Remember, a 3D one, not a 2D one. Before we even get started, I'm going to already lock all the rotations so that he doesn't roll around when we start adding animations and stuff. I'm going to push play just to make sure everything is working and see if he falls in front or behind. Okay, so in my case, I got lucky and he fell in front of this background image, but if he doesn't, I'm going to show you something we haven't done up to this point, but we're going to cover it over and over. But we've always spoken about in the sprite this order in layer. Now this time I want to go and actually create layers. So it's just once it's done, it's a matter of just dropping them all into their own layer. Now I'm going to bring him down a little bit so I can show you how this works. I'm going to put him in front of this background, and we're going to just create a new layer by going to where it says just in front of above order in layer, there's just a sort layer. Click on the default and go to add new, and I'm just going to remove all these current layers that I did for my class prep. We're going to add a new layer by hitting the, we're going to call this one background, and we'll call the other one character or characters, depending, and we might have as many layers as we want. And now I'll come back to this just to show you how the order needs to be. So I'm going to select both backgrounds, and I'm going to go to where it says sort layer and select background, and you'll see that the characters gone backwards, and then I'm going to select the character and I'm going to select character. Now the way these ordering layers work, these sorting layers, is it starts from the top is the background, second one's the next one in front of that, so on and so forth. So if I were to switch these layers around, the character would go to the back. So I'll switch these two around again just to make sure they sit in the correct layer. So that is how you create your own layers. And if you're working on bigger and bigger projects, it's better to create your own layers so that you can just easily select all your objects. And instead of saying what order layer was it supposed to be in, 0, 1, 2, or 3, you just put it into a layer that you predefined beforehand. Okay, now that the characters in front and the rigid bodies and all that are in place, I've already pre-installed Bolt on this machine, so remember to install Bolt. I'm going to select my player. I'm going to add a flow machine, and inside of this flow machine, you'll open it up, you'll see that it currently has no script or no macro attached to this, so click the new button. I'm going to bolts, and I'm also going to just have, as you can see, I've already got another one here, so I'm just going to call this Cuphead controller. No, let's not call it controller, let's call it input controller. There we go. Okay, and when you click edit, and you'll open the window. Sorry, my window opened up on the other viewport, the other screen. I'm just going to make sure all of this is smaller so you have a good idea of what you can see. And as usual, it'll open up with a start and an update. Don't be confused, something I haven't mentioned before, that my Unity is black. It doesn't have any effect on how the work looks. It's just based on what version of Unity you are running. So mine is black because I have the Plus version and not the Unity personal version. So don't stress about that. Okay, so we deleted the start because we only really need the update. So what we need to start with, we're going to do all the inputs, movements and stuff, and as we go, we're going to finish those off, and then we're going to go into setting up each of the animations for that. I'm going to drag off here, and we need to first get input. So we need to type in get button. Actually, we're going to get access, not button, my bad. Get access. And we're going to drag the input.getAccess access name. So we're going to drag this here. And the name we're looking for is horizontal. And where I get this name from, oh, if I had spelled it correctly in the first place, is from the edit project settings. And in here, you will see there's an input tab, and there's the horizontal. There's one horizontal there. There's another horizontal there. These are predefined settings based on what Unity has decided. So this one that I've opened now is for the controller. The one at the top here is for your mouse and your WASD keys and your arrow keys. So just keep in mind that's where I'm getting this name from. Okay, so now that we're getting in the input, we need to create a variable that we're going to multiply against this input. Remember, this input can be, because it's an axis, can be between -1, which is if the character runs from right to left, and then the positive is if the character goes from left to right, and then 0 means the character is not moving. So I'm just going to create a new variable. Now if you're wondering how I maximize my viewport, it is shift spacebar, and wherever your cursor is, if you hold down shift and spacebar, that'll be the window that gets maximized. Okay, so over here I'm going to just have this maximized, so for the video you guys get to see a lot more of it. I'm going to create a variable. You can create the variable either through your variables in the inspector on the right here, or if you're in maximized viewport like me, you'll see on the left here you've got graph, object, scene, app, and saved. So this is a variable I would like to save on the object. I'm going to call this, let's call this player speed. Hit enter to add it, and this is a float. I know that I need movements happen in increments, so I need this variable to be a float so I can easily multiply it with this one. As you can see, it's a blue little dot. The variable I just created is also a blue little dot, so you can see the connection. I'm going to put a default speed of 5, and then I'm just going to left click and drag this variable in. We're just going to multiply. It's the first one that says multiply in math generic. Multiply these two together. Now this is going to be what's giving us the actual speed. At this point I'm going to save because anything could go wrong. And what I need to do is I only need this to control the character's X movement. So if I show up my little gizmo, you'll see that the little red arrow is going from side to side. So that's the input movement I need to affect. The Y is going to be controlled by velocity, this one here. And the Z, we want it to be locked off so it doesn't move at all. I'm going to put the character back up again just to get him out of the way. So let's do that. So we need to create, so drag from here and type in a new vector 3. So we need to, sorry, let's try that again. New vector 3 XYZ. My apologies, that was stupid on my part. There we go. So now we know this is going to drive the X movement. As you noticed, blue is a float. You'll notice that a vector is a struct, and a struct is a combination of different variables, and this one is got 3 of the same, 3 floats, one for the X, one for the Y, and one for the Z. So I'm just going to neaten this up a little bit so we can get movement going. Now the Y, we already know that we are getting it from the rigid body, so I'm just going to drag off here. Now we won't be able to do that. Let's just right click and say rigid body dot velocity, and we're going to do a get. We need to go rigid body dot velocity get. And something I showed in each class, I progressively got better at doing this controller. So some of you will see some things that are a little different. I've just refined the way the controller works. So from here I'm going to drag out and I'm going to type in get dot y. Hold on, let's try that again. Hold the phone, I'm just trying to get this variable. Oh, vector 3 dot y. Sorry, vector 3 dot y. You just need to type that. The other one, some of the classes we use an expose, so expose all those variables. That's not wrong. I just found that we didn't need that entire clunky node to be in the scene, so I'm just doing a vector 3 dot y, and it's a get node. So we're just getting the y, and we're plugging that directly into the y, and then like I said in class, we're leaving the z as 0. We don't want the character to be able to move back and forward in the scene unless that is the kind of controller you want to do. You might want to make a 2.5D type game. So we'll talk about that when the time comes as we evolve this controller. So this update is feeding into this input. It is waiting for you to press either the A, the D, the left or the right arrow. Once it does, it fires information down this line, multiplies it by 5. So if 1 comes out of here, if this is a 1, 1 multiplied by 5 equals 5. And if it's a -1, it becomes a -5. Because you're multiplying a negative number by a positive number, and that goes into the X movement. The Y movement, we're simply getting the character's gravity, the character's physics. We're saying if you fall off a ledge, use the physics because that's what you need to do. And then 0, we're telling it do not move anywhere, stay at 0. Okay, now that this whole thing is set up, we can actually get it moving. So we're going to do a rigid body dot velocity. And this time we're doing a set rigid body. The reason I'm saying that is because this one over here is a get rigid body. Now we're setting the rigid body's velocity. We're going to plug this little vector 3 icon to that little vector 3 icon. We're going to save. I'm going to unmaximize so you guys can see what's happening, and I'm just going to push play. And we now have movement. There we go. And remember that speed variable we created? It's right over here. So if I make this like 20, it's going to move quite fast. And if I make it something like 1, which is the direct raw input of 1 or minus 1, it moves really slowly. That is the reason for why we multiply our input by a speed, so we can control the speed of the actual character movement. So I'm going to put it back to 5. I'm going to stop the game. And there we go. We have our first movement going. Now I want the character to face the direction that he's going, like we did in class. So let's make sure we do that, and we can do that simply by dragging. Let's create a branch. So we're going to drag from this. It's either from here or from there. It makes no difference. We're going to drag here. We're going to do a comparison node. For those of you who do IT or code at school, this is basically me setting up for my if statements. So you can see we've got A is less than B, A is less or equal to B, A is equal to B, A is not equal to B, A is less or greater than B, and then A is greater than B. So these are all the options or that we can. So first I want to make sure if A is equal to B, that means the character is not moving, because B, the value of B is set to 0. So if A, and we're going to drag from here, and you'll see you should get this branch option. We're going to just branch into this. So we're going to say if A and B are equal, don't do anything, because that means the character is not moving. Next, we're going to say if A is greater than B, we're going to do another branch. Remember, the branch has to come off the false, not the true. True means he's not moving. False means that there's some sort of movement. We need to do something with that. And what this means now is if A is greater than B, it means positive number, which means the character is moving right. And if it's less than false, it's moving left. And all we need to do is, for those of you who might not remember, I'm just going to be flipping the sprite. So with the character selected, look at your sprite render, and you'll see underneath it there's a flip X and a flip Y. So if I click flip Y, you'll see that the character flips up and down, and if I flip X, it goes side to side. So just to keep to remind myself, when it's true and my character is moving right, I want my flip X to be false, and when he's moving left to right to left, I want it to be going that way. So it goes like that, and then when I flip it this way, he goes that way. So that's what I want to do. And the script is called sprite renderer, the component. So let's right click and type in sprite renderer. If I could spell, that would be great. I'm going to go and grab the sprite renderer. I'm going to set the flip X. Then I'm going to drag from here. I'm going to set this one to false. Copy paste. I'm going to set this one to true. Then I'm going to add a unit again, and going to do it component dot sprite. Why are you giving me so much crap? Sorry, my thing is being completely full of crap. Typing sprite renderer again. And this time I want to get, there it is, get sprite renderer. So I'm getting the sprite renderer, and I'm going to plug that into not tag. Sorry. Let's try that again. Sprite renderer. This time let's just get sprite renderer. Get. 2 seconds. For the life of me, I know it's a public holiday, so my brain has stopped working for a brief moment. Oh, of course. That would be perfectly fine if I was doing it right the whole time. Okay, so now we just need this flip X. So we're going to plug these two in. I'm just going to push them over here. So this means the character is going right. This means the character is going left. So now we just need to test that to see if it is working. I'll leave this window open here so you can see it firing off in the top and firing off in the bottom. So you'll see. Why is it not firing off? Or maybe I need to have the character selected, just a thought. So we're now on the top, bottom, top, bottom. So this is all working. So something a little different I'm going to do here is, yeah, that's good. We'll leave it like that for now, and then we'll come back to the animation in the next video. So remember how to comment something or how to put a group around it. Hold down Control, left mouse button, and drag over everything you want. Double click on the name at the top, and let's just call this movement, because that's what's happening. And remember, you can change the color in the top left here to whatever color you want. And now we're going to do sorry, we're going to do the jump, and after we've done the jump, we're going to do the ground check, and after we've done the ground check, we're just going to add all the animations in. But now I want to be able to fire a lot of this code off, but I don't want to have all of it like just following after one another like this, because it can be a little hard to read or look at when you're trying to work with all this code. And I like to keep it segmented like this so that it's nice to keep track of. So I'm going to, just after the update, I'm going to drag out and type in sequence. Adding a sequence node, that's going to allow me to plug in multiple sections. So the first one's going to be my movement, and we're going to drag out of here. And I'm going to add a branch. Now remember what we said in class, a node that is orange like this suggests that something needs to be plugged into here. So we're going to plug something into here. We need a variable to ask if we can jump. So under object again, I'm going to type in can jump. And it's going to be a boolean because it is this pinky purple color. And I'm going to say yes, he should be able to jump at the start. So I'm going to drag it out and get the variable and just plug it directly into this check. So it's going to check if you can jump. If you can jump, then do so, jump. So now if this is true, we want to check if the input is. Now actually let's change this up a little bit from what we did in class. We're just going to change the two checks around. So I'm going to go copy, paste this branch. If this is true and that is true, so we're going to check for input first. And when you press the button, it's going to check if you can jump. All I'm doing is switching them around just because I can. So add a unit called get button down. And plug that directly into here, and let's just plug it. So first what we're doing here is we're checking to see if the button's been pressed, and then we're checking if we can jump. The button name, as you probably have guessed, is called jump. And if we do, we're just going to drag off here. We're going to type in rigid body dot velocity. Now in some of the classes we used an add force, and you can do that, or you can add a velocity. I found that a velocity seems to be a little more stable as far as the result that I want out of it. So I'm going to show you the add velocity. It's pretty much the same concept. A force is something that will allow you to apply different types of force. In this case, it's going to add velocity in one way only. So this gives me a more reliable result, at least the way I find it. Now we just need to do what I forgot to do between here again is create a new vector 3 XYZ. We're just going to plug this directly into there while we're preempting what's going to happen. Okay, now again we only need to add force or movement in the Y, because that's where we want the jumping. So all we're going to do is, just for safety's sake, I'm going to drag this input X and plug it into X. Z stays the same way again, and we're just going to add a velocity value here. So let's create a new variable here called jump force, let's call it, and it's going to be of float, and I'm not sure how big this is going to be, so let's make it 10 for now. I'm going to drag out the jump force and I'm going to plug it into the Y. So now as it stands, we should have a character that can jump, and now we're going to have this kind of Flappy Bird situation where we're going to be able to constantly jump. As you can see, the jump is quite high, so I'm going to tweak that, but it is working. So we now have the jumping. Now we need to disable the jump. As we go, I'm going to show you guys how to do double jumps, triple jumps, whatever you want to do, but every jump needs to be controlled. So that's why we created this variable called can jump. So I'm going to drag the can jump variable over here, holding down Alt, left click and drag it in, and you'll notice this one here is a get variable, and what we're doing here is we're doing a set variable. So after we jump, we want to set can jump. Remember, it's orange, which means it needs an input, and from here you just want to break it out to a bool literal, because I know it's a boolean, so I'm going to do a literal bool to bool. We're going to say you can't jump anymore. So all we're doing is closing off this gate here. So we're going to say when you can jump, you're going to go, and when you can't, when you're done, that's it. You will not be able to jump anymore. See, so I am done. I cannot jump no longer. The bool has been disabled. I'm also going to change this jump force to something like 7. Nice. Okay, I'm just sorting out my line work here. And now we're going to need to do a check. So let's make a nice little group around this. I'm going to call this jumping. Change the color to something like blue. Just push it a little down so it's not literally on top of each other. Okay, so now we have movement, we have jumping, and now we need to be able to, in the segment, you can see sequence, you can see there's only 2. So put in a 3 there, and you'll see it adds a new little node here. I'm going to drag from here, and again, like we did in class, we're going to add a new branch, another if statement, because I want to do something only if blah blah blah. So I'm just going to double check again against my other controller, because I've done so many changes since the last time that exactly like I've just noticed I have done. We're going to do a small change. It's going to be a live change, as we see. So as you probably noticed in the other screen, I essentially only used one branch just to and did a double check. So let's do that. So apologies for my dogs, they're in the background barking. I'm going to check if this, and drag out and type in and. If this is true and this is true, then that will be true. So that's all we did different to class. I'm just checking if these two options are true, then fire off that event. If not, do nothing. Now, as you probably remember in class, this one is to check if the character is on his downward velocity. So instead of typing all of this stuff again, because we're going to get rigid body velocity dot get dot y. That's what we're going to do there. So let's just type it out for practice sake. Type in rigid body dot velocity. And then from here, we're doing a vector3.y. And now we're going to be checking to see if this is less than 0, which means then the character is going from the top of the screen down, because his velocity is in a negative, which means we can start the Raycast. Okay, so this is going to be, all we're doing all of this for is just basically to set this bool here back to true. So if that's true, we're going to drag out and type in physics.raycast, and we're doing a normal Raycast. There's also a Raycast 2D, depending. We're looking for origin, direction, max distance, layer mask. That is all we need from here. There is other raycasts for more advanced outcomes. And while we add it, I'm just going to drag off this branch here and just add in the branch for when it does fire true. Okay, so the origin is simple. It's where the character is. The direction is in which direction? Forward, backwards, up, down, left, right. What direction do we want the laser beam to fire? So if the character's here, do we want the raycast to start here and go out that way, or that way, or that way, or that way? In this case, we want to start here and we want to go down towards the ground to find the ground. This is a ground check, so we're going to check for the ground. So from here, we're just going to drag out. I'm going to type in transform.position, because all I need is the position of the character for the origin, and the direction. There's a really nice function set up in Unity C#, which is to get the forward direction, back, up, down, left, right. So I'm going to drag from here. I'm going to type in vector3.forward, sorry, dot down, my bad. And now we're going to raycast the line from the character center towards the ground. And the distance is how long will this laser beam be before it stops casting, before it stops and then dies. We're going to give that a value. So we're going to do that as a dynamic value, so we can just change it on the fly if we need to. Select my player, and I'm going to show you how to create the variable on this side, because it's just so that you can see how I'm doing it in two locations. This one's going to be the ray distance. It's going to be a float again, and by default I'm going to calculate that he is 1 unit big, so that's half a unit from the middle of him. So I'm going to make it about 0.5. This will change based on the scene of the size of your scale, the size of your scene, the size of your characters. In future projects, just be aware this value will have to be tweaked based on the height of your character. So in the case of this, remember 1 unit is 1 meter in Unity, so I've made this half a meter raycast. And if your character is 2 meters tall and his pelvis is somewhere in the middle of 1.2, around about where his belly button is, then you need to compensate for that and make the raycast further. So this ray distance is going to go into the max distance, and then now we need a layer. What layer are we going to be hitting or looking for? We're going to drag out of here, and we're just going to type in layer mask. Click on layer mask. It's going to bring us to a new window, and we're going to say layer mask literal. We don't have the layer yet, because you'll see I do have the layer, so I'm not going to, I'll delete it and start again. So let's select the collider that I created. Go to default layers, go add. I'm going to remove this ground, and you'll see that the first available layer is user layer 8. So let's call this ground floor, whatever you want to call it. We're going to call it ground. Select the floor collider, and in the layers, click on that and add it so that we can raycast for ground. Now here you'll see that ground is available at the bottom. So if all of these come back true, if the origin fires off in the direction of down, at the max distance it hits this ground, then that means we can jump again. All we need to do is grab this can jump with its bool, go Control C, Control V, drag it down here, and when this is true, turn that back on. So let's see if this works, shall we? Okay. I'm just going to make sure the character is selected again. So we can see that over there, you can see that he's not currently falling. When he falls, you can see that it fires off true when he gets near the ground. Probably shorten it a little bit. He can kind of do this little Tigger jump from Winnie the Pooh. So I'm going to shorten it to, let's see, while it's in live update, so I can just kind of suss out which one works and what point it stops working. Okay, let's try 0.35. We can keep going till it stops working, basically. Okay, I'm going to leave it at about 0.3, I think. Nice. Okay, so that works really well. I'm just going to have to set this variable, remember, while in play mode, that variable will not stay. Everything you do inside of the editor here will update in real time and stay updated, but everything else will not. It will, if it's in the actual editor, you will lose it. Okay, so there we go. Let's do a drag control left click and call this ground check. Drag it across, change the color to something like this orangey color. Okay, so now we've got the movement, the jumping, and the ground check. So now we're going to go into actually playing the animations, getting the characters' animations working. So let's do that. You have the sprite sheet, so we're going to create the animations and we're going to work from there. First thing I need to do is in the assets folder, right click and create a new folder. Call this animations because I like to keep it nice and tidy, and inside these animations I want to right click and create a new folder called characters, so that you might have background animations, character animations, that sort of thing. There we go, that folder is done. Now the character itself needs an animator. Like we've seen in the previous tutorials I've made, the character needs an animator in order to play these animations. So I'm going to add a component, type in animator, not animation, animator. And now an animator requires a controller. So inside of the animation, might as well put it here. Inside the character, I'm going to right click and create a animator controller. I'm going to call this Cuphead Anim Controller. There we go. And I'm just going to select the player and I'm going to drag this Cuphead Anim Controller directly where it says controller in the animator. Don't worry about avatars. Avatars are for if you have characters who are bipedal and the animation is imported that as humanoids, so don't ignore anything else on this system. Oh, one more thing before we forget. If you're having issues, sometimes your character might fall through the floor, he might run through a wall. In the rigid body settings, just make sure you set the collision detection where it says discrete to continuous or continuous dynamic. I will go for continuous dynamic because my character might be running a little bit fast or whatever the case may be, and I don't want him to fall through the floor or jump through an enemy. That's okay. So now that we have the animator, we can start by, you should have the animation window. If you don't, I'm just going to close and show you where I found it. Go to window, animations. You'll see we'll need both the animation, might as well open that up. I want to put this down here. And I'm going to window, animation, animator, and I'm going to just leave it. It normally docks itself to the top. So the one is used to create animation. The other one is what drives the animation. You'll see it right now as we do it. So let's grab the sprites and select the character. Now in order to create animation, it needs to have an object with an animator, and you'll see the moment you do that, it says to begin animating player, create an animation clip. So click create. I'm going to go out of assets into animation characters. I'm going to call this idle. There we go. You'll see that this window pops up here. We're going to just drag this down here. You'll see the idle animations now popped up inside here. I'm going to go to the sprites. I'm going to go to characters. I'm going to go into idle, and I'm just going to drag, shift, select the first one, shift, and click the last one, and drag them all into this timeline. Now I'm going to go back to this window so you can see it. So you'll see the characters idling very fast. So we're going to make it go a little faster. Now your inclination is to think that this is 5 seconds when this is that's 0.05 is actually 5 frames, which means this here is not playing at a very slow rate. So you'll see you've got all these little diamonds. These are your keyframes. You'll see one little rectangle on the left, one rectangle on the right. When you have everything selected, those are the ways you scale up your animation or drag your animations out. So I'm going to drag the one on the right to make it bigger. I think I'm going to make it about 20 frames. Might be a little bit fast, but let's actually make it 30 frames. So make it a full second. Spacebar to play the animation in here. Okay, so that's the one animation done. I'm going to click on where it says idle. I'm going to go and create a new clip, and I'm going to call this one run. And I'm going to go to the run section, and there's normal and there's shooting, just makes no difference. I'm going to pick normal because when the time comes we'll probably use shooting. I'm going to select the first one, go all the way down before it says run turnaround. So it's 1 through 16. I need to grab all of those frames and drag them into my new run. Press play. It's not bad, it just needs to be slowed down by a fraction. So instead of, I think I'm going to make this entire animation play over a second. Might need to be a little bit. Okay, so let's try. It was 15. No, I'm going to leave it at 30 seconds for now. Okay, and the last animation we need to create, so go run, create a clip and call this jump. And then obviously I'm going to go jump. I'm going to select all the jump animations, drag them into the animator and just push play. Okay, that's not bad. I'm probably just going to make it about 15 frames long instead. Yeah, that's not bad. There we go. So you'll notice the jump is just a somersault, and animation in game, unless you're using root motion, which we'll cover later on, is normally in one location, one spot, so that you can move the character using velocity. So now that we have these three animations, we've got our idle, jump, and our run. We're going to set it up inside of the animator. So let's go to the animator. You'll see all three animations are here. We're going to delete the run because we're going to use that as a, we're going to set it up manually inside of a blend tree, and we're going to use jump. So I'm going to put jump over here. For the time being, I'm going to select the idle and rename it over here to loco for locomotion. And I'm going to right click on this orange transition, say create new blend tree and state. I'm going to double click on that and you'll see that there's something actually inside there. Now a blend tree, for those of you struggling to think, understand the concept, imagine putting all of these animations into almost like a collection that have all, they're all related and understand where the other one belongs to the other one, and then when you change speed, you'll change direction or change animation or change state. So if you blend trees are really powerful when doing, let's say, a third-person shooter, when you run forward, strafe right, strafe left, run back, that sort of thing, and those can all sit inside of a blend tree, and they will change based on the direction the character's moving and the speed the character's moving. So right now we're going to do a one-dimensional blend tree. We will do, in video 3, we will do a two-dimensional blend tree. Or was that video 2? Good point. So let's just set this up, and then we will talk about the difference. So one-dimensional means it's just between a it's a straight line with animations on a timeline. A 2D one allows for a three-dimensional like graph. So you've got an X and a Y graph, but when we get there, you'll have a better understand. So we're just doing a 1D blend tree. We're hitting the little plus, add motion field, plus, add motion field. So all we need is our idle animation to be in the first one, our run animation to be in the second one, and let me push play down here so you can see the little character animating. Try to make this window a little bit bigger. It's been full of crap. There we go. So you can see the characters playing his little item. When I slide this little red line, you'll see that he starts to run and then stand still, run, stand still. There we go. So that is what's controlling from the idle, and it does a really nice blending between the two. So that is why we use blend trees. You can add as many of the animations as, for example, if we had an idle walk run, then we could have 3 of these, we could have 4 of them, up to you. So we're now currently in the loco state. Next to it you'll see it says base layer. Click on that and we're going to be back in the top here. Now, just to make sure, by default Animator always has one float parameter set up. It's called blend here. We're just going to call that speed, and we need to make sure on the right here, instead of our blend tree, the parameter that's being used is called speed, because we're going to call that in code for this to play. Okay, so we need to essentially fire this animation off from the flow graph. So now that we have this set up, we're going to go into the flow graph, and we're going to do it where the movement actually happens, over here. Just going to feed off this input, and we're going to fire off the animation when he's moving. That is it. So we can do it. Let's just do it right over here. Let's do the animator right before we do everything else. So we're going we're going to drag off here. We're going to do a set animator float. Let's try this again. Animator.set float. That should work. Animator.set float. There we go. And we're going to feed this value into here. But the problem is our animation has only a 0 to 1. This value here will go into the positive, the negative, which means this won't work. So we just need to plug this directly into here. The name of the variable we called was speed. So we just need to drag off this value here and type in absolute. Absolute means even if it's a negative value, it will make it a positive value. So absolute will always convert a value from a negative to a positive. Okay, so let's test this out. Now, because I dragged from over here, I'm getting a value of 1. So I don't have to worry about the speed changing in that animator that I set up. Let's just make this nice and neat. So let's test if this works. If we've done our job right, we should have a little character that idles and then runs. So we have him now running, and then if he stops, he idles, runs. Now we just need to have him so that he's not running in the air. Now my variable, I think my Raycast might be a little short now. Can be a little finicky, so I'm going to make this 0.5 just to be safe. Again, okay, so let's set up the jump animation. So we're going to go in here, go back to the base layer. We have the jump, and I'm going to put the jump above the loco because in my brain that makes sense, because obviously you jump up, therefore you're going up. We're going to right click on this and make a transition. We need a variable that drives this transition here. So what happens? How do I go from here to there? Obviously, I'm going to say if you can jump, then go up there. We're going to create a new variable by clicking the little plus over here, and it's a boolean. So we're going to say, let's just say jumping. This variable is going to be jumping. Jumping is false because we want it to be in the movement. So click on this line, you'll see, make this smaller again, that we have this little animation blending tree thing here with this little play. So you can see it will blend into here. Now has exit time means if the animation has completed, it will leave this state and go back down. We don't want that. We want this to have instant feedback. We're going to turn off has exit time. I'm going to hit the little plus at the bottom here, and I'm going to select from this drop down jumping. Yeah, so if jumping is true, then jump. Right click on the top state and make a new transition, then go down. You'll see one arrow going from bottom to top, and then the top to bottom is when we're leaving the jumping. So again, turn off has exit time. The list is empty of conditions. Let's add a condition. We already know it's called jumping, and this time we want it to be false. So we're saying if he's jumping, play this animation. If he's not jumping anymore, go back to the normal state. So we know the variable is called jumping, so I'm just going to double click on that so I can Control C to copy it, and we're going to go into here. So we're going to go into jumping. If movement and that is true, we're going to fire off all the way through to here, and we're going to drag off here, and we're going to do a animator.set bool, because that's what we created. So animator.set bool, the name and the value. The name is called jumping, and the value is true. He is jumping. We're going to Control C this, and we're going to paste it over here. So when he hits the ground and he hits the ground, then he's no longer jumping. So I disabled that variable there. So this one is just saying whether you're jumping or not. We're going to now drag this animator down here so you can see what's happening. These are the two states. Orange means it's the active state and the main state. You'll see a little below, there'll be a little blue line that's like a loading bar in the state of the animation that is currently playing. So if we look at the window and look at the animator, let me select the player so we can see it. You'll see there's this little blue line that's playing through the animation. When I jump, you'll see it's in the top state, and it plays through over and over. And then when he hits the ground, he stops playing the animation. go. So now we have the animation working, the animation moving. We have one controller set up, and in the next video we're going to talk about how to make this more of an isometric top-down controller that you can use for different other games. And then we're also going to do a two-dimensional blend tree, which will now expand on the concept of what a blend tree is. So remember, we created two variables. One is a float for the actual speed, one is a jump for the jumping. And just one more test just to show you, look at where my cursor is for these variables. Look at how the speed will update and the jump will get ticked on and off like that. So there you can see that the boolean goes on and off. If I run left, right, you'll see that the value is always a positive number because I put in that absolute value. There we go. We have a little moving cup head. We have in-air control. And that's it for this video. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, just drop it on Classroom under this video and I will respond as quickly as I can. Thank you.